What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. We have been brought up to experience ourselves as isolated centers of awareness and action, placed in a world that is not us, that is foreign, alien, other, which we confront. Whereas in fact, you are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real deep down you is the whole universe. And it's doing your living organism and all its behavior. It's expressing it as a singer sings a song. We've been hoodwinked into the feeling that we exist only inside our skins. That is a hallucination. We need to experience ourselves in such a way that we could say that our real body is not just what's inside the skin, but our whole total external environment. Because if we don't experience ourselves that way, we mistreat our environment. We treat it as an enemy. We try to beat it into submission. And if we do that, comes disaster. Here is a conception of nature as something you must trust. Outside nature, the birds, the bees, the flowers, the mountains, the clouds, and inside nature, human nature. Now, nature isn't trustworthy completely. It'll sometimes let you down with a wallop. But that's the risk you take. That's the risk of life. What's the alternative? I do not trust nature at all. It's got to be watched. You know what that leads to? It leads to the totalitarian state where everybody is his brother's policeman, where everybody is watching everybody else to report them to the authorities, where you can't trust your own motivation. If you can learn what the Chinese call purposelessness, they think nature is purposeless. When we say something's purposeless, that's put down. There's no future in it. It's a washout. But when they hear the word purposeless, they think that's just great. It's like the waves washing against the shore, going on and on and on forever with no meaning. All music is purposeless. Is music getting somewhere? If it were, if the aim of music of a symphony were to get to the final bar, the best conductor would be the one who got there fastest. See, dancing, when you dance, do you aim to arrive at a particular place on the floor? Is that the idea of dancing? No. The aim of dancing is to dance, is the present. Well, it's exactly the same with our life. We think life has a purpose. Now, here's the choice. Are you going to trust it or not? If you do trust it, you may get let down. And this it is yourself, your own nature, and all nature around you. There are going to be mistakes. But if you don't trust it at all, it's a washout. going to fence yourself round with rules and regulations and laws and prescriptions and policemen and guards, and who's going to guard the guards, and who's going to look after Big Brother to be sure that he doesn't do something stupid. No go. To live, I must have faith. I must trust myself to the totally unknown. I must trust myself to a nature which doesn't have a boss, because a boss is a system of mistrust. That is why Lao Tzu's Tao loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them.
It's strange, isn't it? How the world convinces you that freedom has a price tag, that somewhere on the other side of financial success, there waits a version of you who finally breathes without fear. You picture it often, that effortless life, with no more bills to worry about, no debts to calculate, no need to chase anyone or anything. Yet when you finally taste a glimpse of that comfort, something unexpected happens. Instead of peace, you feel a quiet emptiness. You look at your bank account and realize that the numbers may have changed, but the restlessness within you hasn't. What most people call financial freedom is often just a more comfortable form of slavery. You become free from the old anxieties, only to replace them with new ones. Now the question isn't how do I survive, but how do I stay ahead? How do I protect what I've built? How do I make sure it doesn't all vanish? And so, even in abundance, you worry. Even in wealth, you tremble. Money, after all, is an abstraction, a symbol of value that we mistake for value itself. The illusion begins when you start believing that money is a source of freedom rather than a tool. In truth, it is simply a measure of human trust, a shared agreement, a token for the exchange of energy, skill, and time. But because we live in a world that worships measurement, we mistake the symbol for the substance. We try to buy freedom the same way we buy comfort, not realizing that true freedom can't be purchased. It can only be perceived. If you pay close attention to people who have made their fortune, you'll often notice the peculiar anxiety that follows them. It's not the same fear of scarcity they had before, but a subtler one, a fear of losing identity. For so long, they were defined by their pursuit. Their dreams were driven by struggle, by the next milestone. When the pursuit ends, they often don't know who they are without it, and so they keep running. They keep accumulating. They turn life into a game of endless increase, unaware that they've become prisoners to their own success. The human mind has an astonishing ability to normalize everything it touches. That's why people who once dreamed of earning a few $100s a week now can't sleep unless they're chasing thousands. We move the goalposts every time we reach them, not because we're greedy, but because the ego can't survive without pursuit. The ego lives in the distance between where you are and where you think you should be. So when money removes that distance, the ego quietly creates a new one. That's why you might have noticed, even after you reach a certain level of comfort, a quiet voice still says, "It's not enough." It's the same voice that once said, "When I get there, I'll finally be happy." But happiness doesn't wait at the end of the road. It exists only in the act of walking. The tragedy of modern ambition is that it teaches people to run faster toward a finish line that doesn't exist. Money itself isn't evil. It's neutral, like water or fire. It can nurture or destroy, depending on how it's held. But the human tendency to attach identity to money, that's where the suffering begins. Because once you believe your worth depends on your wealth, Every fluctuation in your fortune feels like a fluctuation in your soul. When your net worth rises, you feel strong. When it falls, you feel small. And in that fragile dance between pride and panic, you lose sight of the truth. You were never meant to be measured in digits. Money is a form of play, a beautifully sophisticated game that humanity created for itself. The problem is that we've forgotten it's a game. We treat it as survival. We measure human success by the numbers printed on a screen, and we wonder why everyone feels so anxious. Because when play becomes pressure, joy turns into tension. You can see it everywhere. The man in a suit staring at his phone in a restaurant, unable to taste his meal. The woman scrolling through investment charts late at night, her eyes dim from the glow of her own ambition. The young person glued to videos about financial freedom, yet living in constant comparison with people who seem freer than them. We've turned freedom into another commodity to be marketed, sold, and envied. We think, if I can just make more, then I'll be free. But freedom that depends on a future condition isn't freedom. It's postponement. It's a subtle way of saying, I can't live now because I haven't earned it yet. And this is where the illusion deepens. Because when you finally get there, when the bills are paid and the debts are gone, you suddenly realize that you still don't know how to rest. You've trained your mind to chase, not to be still. And so, when there's nothing left to chase, you feel uneasy. You start new projects, new goals, new investments, anything to keep the machine running. You can buy time, but you can't buy presence. You can buy comfort, but not contentment. And yet, most people spend their entire lives trying to buy the things that can only be found in stillness. Wealth without awareness is a trap. When you forget to enjoy life, money simply becomes a more elaborate way to distract yourself from it. You can't really get something for nothing, because you can't really get anything at all. Life isn't about getting, it's about being. We misunderstand abundance. We think it means more possessions, more digits, more influence. But in truth, abundance is the ability to experience the present moment without resistance. It's the peace that arises when you no longer need anything to feel complete. Imagine you were born in a world where money didn't exist, only trade, cooperation, and trust. Would you still feel poor? Or would you see that the true currency of life is time, attention, and love? Those three are the only forms of wealth that never lose value, never suffer inflation, and never decay when shared. Yet those are the very things we trade away for symbols. You might say, but money gives me freedom. And yes, it can give you choices, but choices are not freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose without fear. It is a state of mind, not a state of account. You can have billions and still feel trapped in comparison, or have very little and feel vast inside. The most powerful people in the world are not those who can buy anything they want, but those who need nothing to feel whole. That is why the mystics, monks, and philosophers across history have always seemed strangely serene, not because they rejected money, but because they saw through it. They understood that the desire for control is the root of all bondage, and money is one of the cleverest illusions of control that humanity ever invented. So much of modern life is built around the fear of loss. We insure everything, save everything, protect everything, as if immortality could be purchased in monthly payments. But what if true freedom lies not in what you secure, but in what you can release? We suffer from a peculiar form of madness. We spend our lives earning money to live, and then forget to live while earning it. Think of how many moments are lost to worry. How much joy is postponed because it didn't seem practical at the time. We tell ourselves that one day, when everything is in order, we'll finally relax. But that day never arrives, because life was never designed to be in order. It was designed to be experienced. To the person who has chased success all their life, the greatest challenge isn't earning more, it's learning how to stop. To sit quietly in the abundance they already have, and realize that peace doesn't come from possession, but perception. The pursuit of wealth can be beautiful when it's creative, when it's done as an art, a dance with life, not a struggle against it. But when it becomes obsession, it distorts your entire relationship with existence. Because in your attempt to own the world, you forget that you're already part of it. You forget that every sunset, every breath, every heartbeat is wealth beyond measure. The truth is not to condemn money, but to reveal its limits. Do not seek yourself in what you earn, because if your identity depends on your success, then even when you win, you lose. You become like a man clutching water. The tighter you hold, the less you have. And so the paradox remains. The more you chase freedom through money, the more you bind yourself to it. The moment you believe you need it to be happy, you've already surrendered your freedom to it. But if you can see through the illusion, if you can learn to play with money instead of worshiping it, something miraculous happens. You begin to experience wealth as flow rather than possession. You begin to move through life with lightness rather than tension. You begin to realize that freedom isn't something to achieve, but something you've always had. And that realization, once seen, can never be unseen. There comes a point in every person's life when they must ask a frighteningly honest question. What am I really chasing? For years, you've called it security, success, stability. But beneath those words, there is something deeper, a longing not for money, but for meaning, for a feeling of safety that no number seems to provide, for a sense of being enough. And yet, the tragedy is that you already are. You cannot get to happiness. You can only be it. That is what so many forget. They keep trying to arrive at a place that was never elsewhere. Freedom is not a destination. It is a quality of awareness, a way of seeing life without being dominated by the need to control it. Money, in itself, is simply condensed energy. It amplifies who you already are. If you are anxious, it gives you more things to be anxious about. If you are free, it gives you more ways to express that freedom. That is why some people become miserable when they become wealthy. The noise inside them was never addressed, only magnified. But once you understand this, something begins to shift. You start to see that your relationship with money mirrors your relationship with life itself. The same way you grasp for control in your finances, you grasp for certainty in your future. The same way you hoard wealth out of fear, you hoard emotions out of insecurity. And when you let go of one, you begin to soften toward the other. The art of freedom is not about how much you have, but how lightly you can hold it. When you stop trying to possess everything, you realize you already belong to everything. That is the essence of effortless action. The understanding that wealth, like water, flows best when it is not forced. Think of a river. You can swim with it, or you can exhaust yourself fighting against it. The current does not care whether you resist. It keeps moving. And so, the wise person learns to float. They allow wealth to come and go like the tide, understanding that both movement and stillness are part of the same ocean. In our culture, we celebrate accumulation. We admire those who climb, collect, and conquer. But rarely do we honor those who release. Yet, release is where true power hides, because only the one who can let go fully is the one who is no longer afraid. There is a profound freedom in being able to say, if it comes, good. If it goes, good. Imagine if you could live like that, not careless, but deeply trusting. To live so completely in the present that you stop postponing peace for a tomorrow that never arrives. You see, money can only bring freedom to those who are already free inside. To everyone else, it becomes another chain. A golden one, perhaps, but still a chain. Because the moment you say, I will relax when I have enough, you have made your peace conditional on something external, something the world can always take away. The only real wealth is inner stillness. When you can sit in silence with nothing to prove, nothing to protect, and still feel whole, that is when you have arrived. And strangely enough, it is from that very stillness that abundance flows. Because when you stop chasing, you create space for things to find you. There is a principle of reversal in life. The harder you try to hold on, the faster things slip through your fingers. But when you relax your grip, when you allow, you begin to notice that life naturally supports you. Opportunities arise, people appear, synchronicities unfold, not because you forced them, but because you stopped resisting them. Think of a tree. It does not strain to grow, yet it grows. It does not demand fruit, yet fruit appears. It simply exists in alignment with what it is, and in that alignment, abundance becomes inevitable. The same law applies to you. If you were to measure your wealth not in dollars, but in awareness, how rich would you be? How present are you to your own life? How deeply do you experience each moment before it slips away? Most people trade this awareness for the illusion of progress. They live in a constant state of not yet, always preparing to live, but never arriving. And yet, life keeps happening, not later, but now. That is the ultimate irony. We try to buy more time, forgetting that time is the only currency we can never increase. Every moment spent chasing becomes a moment unseen, unlived, unappreciated. But when you realize that this very moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only enough that ever existed, something inside you softens. You no longer fight the flow. You start to dance with it. The meaning of money is in its movement. It is not meant to be hoarded, but circulated. It is energy in motion. And when you let it move, it brings life. When you freeze it, it begins to die. The same is true for joy, for love, for creativity. These things only remain alive when shared. That is why generosity has always been the mark of a truly wealthy spirit. Because generosity is not about giving away money. It is about releasing attachment. It is saying, I trust life enough to let this go. And the universe, being an echo of that same trust, often responds in kind. Real wealth does not come from possessing more, but from needing less. You become infinitely rich the moment you stop trying to compensate for your sense of lack. You realize that all this time, you were never chasing money, you were chasing yourself. You were searching for the feeling of being enough. And the moment you recognize that you already are, the chase ends. This does not mean you abandon ambition or stop working. It simply means you stop confusing effort with worth. You work not to become something, but to express what you already are. That shift, subtle as it seems, transforms everything. Suddenly, your actions feel lighter. You stop competing and start creating. You stop worrying about outcomes because you understand that what truly matters was never at stake. The real purpose of money is play, to facilitate exchange, creativity, and connection, not to define identity. When you begin to treat it as play, you participate in the great rhythm of life without losing yourself in it. You can work hard, earn much, even enjoy luxury, but you no longer confuse the mask for the face. Look around the world and you will notice that the happiest people are not necessarily those who have the most, but those who are most alive. They use money like musicians use notes, as a means of expression, not measurement. They can laugh at losses, smile through uncertainty, and still trust the unfolding of things. You may not control every rise and fall of fortune, but you can always control your relationship to it. You can choose to see money as movement rather than meaning. You can choose to treat wealth as a guest rather than a god. The moment you stop believing that happiness lies somewhere beyond the next financial milestone, you begin to wake up. You realize that the true treasure of life is not stored in banks, but in awareness, in the ability to see beauty in what is already here. Imagine living from that space. You still earn, still plan, still invest, but you no longer suffer through it. You no longer chase freedom, you express it. Because the free person is not one who has escaped the system, but one who no longer believes it defines them. Wealth and freedom are not opposites. They only appear that way when you forget who you are. When you remember, everything becomes simple. You earn when you need to, you rest when you can, and you allow life to unfold in its rhythm. And then, quite mysteriously, abundance finds its way back to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. You stopped clutching at life and started trusting it. The fool chases freedom through control. The wise simply realize that control was never needed. And in that realization, you discover the most profound truth of all.
You see, there is something very curious happening right now. Those who have begun to wake up, those who have started to see through the game, are quietly disappearing. Not with speeches or noise, but simply stepping back, no longer interested in the usual performance. If you felt this yourself, if ordinary conversations, social events, and small performances have started to feel unbearable, what I'm about to say may ease you. This isn't a disorder. It isn't antisocial behavior. It's what naturally happens when a person wakes up. By waking up, I don't mean reading a few books on philosophy or having a nice idea about oneness. I mean that moment when you suddenly notice that most of what people are doing is sleepwalking. They move around as if on automatic, playing roles they didn't choose, repeating lines they didn't write. And when you're asleep yourself, this doesn't seem strange at all. You blend in, you talk about nothing and think it matters. You care about other people's opinions and believe they're important. You chase things with no real substance and call it success. But when the veil drops, everything shifts. It's like walking out of a dark cinema into daylight. You can try to go back and enjoy the film, but you can't anymore because you know it's just a projection. You've seen the screen for what it is. That's what's happening to people who are waking up now. They find they can't keep participating in the collective dream, not because they think they're better than anyone else, but because their system simply can't accept what it once believed. Society runs on an agreement, a shared decision to pretend the characters we play are who we are, to pretend that the opinions we've absorbed are personal truths, to pretend that all this rushing and seriousness is actually leading somewhere important. The whole play only works if everyone stays in character. But when someone wakes up, they stop playing. They forget the script. They look directly at the stage itself. And this makes others uncomfortable, because the awakened can see beneath the surface. They see the fear behind the confidence, the emptiness behind the busyness. The fact that most arguments aren't about what people think they're about at all. And so they step away, not out of rejection, but because they can no longer pretend the game is real. When someone shouts their outrage into the public square, the awakened person doesn't see an enemy. They see unconscious material looking for somewhere to land. When society splits itself into us and them, the awakened person understands that both sides are simply projections colliding with each other. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending it's serious business. You can't take sides with the same heat and certainty as before, because you know it's all just a way of avoiding the mirror. So what does one do in that position? You withdraw. Not because you've stopped caring, not because you hate people, but because staying in the game demands that you deny what you've come to understand. Every conversation asks you to act as if you haven't seen what you've seen. Every social situation expects you to wear an older version of yourself, a mask that no longer fits. And after enough time, something in you refuses. It simply says, stop. Stop pretending. Stop shrinking yourself just to keep up the act. Go where you can actually breathe. And let's be clear, this is not about avoiding life. It's not spiritual bypassing. It's not running away from the world because it's too hard. It's something much simpler and far more honest. It's the recognition that staying in unconscious environments slowly harms consciousness itself. It's like putting a living plant in a dark room. It might survive for a while, but eventually it withers. Being surrounded by people who are asleep isn't just uncomfortable, it's draining. You spend an enormous amount of energy holding your center while everything around you pulls you off balance. You filter out projections, resist getting swept into emotional currents, and keep your awareness clear while others drift in fog. And no one sees the work you're doing because it's invisible, but it's real, and it costs you energy. Eventually, you realize you're spending all your strength just trying to stay awake in places that keep pulling you back to sleep. And that's when the choice appears. You choose consciousness over belonging, truth over approval, your own clarity over the comfort of being accepted by those who can't yet see what you see. That's when the disappearing begins. The first thing to go is the noise. Social media, for example, becomes unbearable because you can feel its nature. It's a machine built to keep people unconscious. Scrolling, judging, comparing, getting outraged, getting distracted. If you're awake, it's like standing in a river of sewage. So, you stop. You log out, you delete the apps, you stop feeding the machine. And without anyone noticing, hours of your life quietly return to you. Then you start leaving social circles, not with resentment, not with grand announcements. You simply stop showing up. Because you begin to see that most social spaces are stages. People are performing their lives, performing success, performing confidence, performing happiness, performing their opinions, and you can no longer play that part. Your real self has emerged, and it has no interest in putting on a mask. Then you leave certain relationships, not because you suddenly stop caring about people, but because many of those bonds were built on a version of you that no longer exists. The sleeping version. Once you've woken up, you find there's no shared language anymore. You're no longer living in the same world. They're still speaking from inside the dream, and you're no longer in it. Then comes the career. That's often the hardest part. Because society has tied identity to work so tightly that leaving a job can feel like leaving yourself. But when you awaken, something changes. You can't play along with a system you can see through. You can't pretend to care about things that don't matter to you anymore. You can't sell your energy to roles that require you to stay unconscious. So, you leave. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly, but you do leave. Because to stay would mean to slowly suffocate the very awareness you fought to bring into being. Now, here's the part most people misunderstand. They think disappearing from the noise means you'll end up isolated, lonely, depressed. But for someone who's awake, the opposite happens. In solitude, the loneliness ends. Because loneliness isn't about being without people, it's about being unseen among them. Aloneness is different. Aloneness is clarity. It's the space where you no longer have to twist yourself into a shape that fits. When the awakened person withdraws, they discover something most never realize. They were never truly with other people in the first place. Physical proximity is not connection. Real connection happens only when consciousness meets consciousness. And when you're awake in a room full of sleeping people, there's no one to meet. But in solitude, away from the noise and the endless performing, you finally meet yourself. Not the version you rehearsed for others, not the mask that was trained to fit into the world, but the living, breathing awareness behind all of that. And that isn't lonely, that is coming home. In that quiet space, you can finally hear your own thoughts without the static of 1,000 other voices. You can feel your own emotions without carrying everyone else's. You can discover what you actually want, what you actually believe, who you actually are. This is what I call the hermit phase. And it's not optional. It's essential. You cannot transform while clinging to every old connection and expectation. A caterpillar does not become a butterfly in the middle of a crowd. It withdraws, it cocoons, it goes silent for a while. And in the same way, awakening requires a period of retreat, not as escape, but as integration. This is when all the unconscious material you've carried for years finally has space to surface, to be seen and to be released. They are healing the damage that came from years of pretending to be someone they were not. They are gathering the strength to stand on their own ground, even when the rest of the world is still asleep. And this is no small task. It is much harder than staying unconscious. Because when you are awake, you lose the luxury of blame. You can no longer project your pain onto others. You can no longer hide from yourself in busyness, noise, or drama. Everything you've buried comes to the surface, and you must face it. No one can do that for you. But here's the strange, beautiful thing. Once you've walked through that darkness, once you've integrated what you've avoided, made peace with your shadow, and found what's real inside yourself, you stop depending on the world for your sense of reality. You stop needing approval. You stop begging for belonging. You no longer need the crowd to tell you who you are. You have something better. You found yourself. And from that place, if you choose to return to society, you return differently. Not to dive back into the noise, but to offer a quiet alternative. You become what I call a border dweller. Someone who stands with one foot in the sleeping world and one in the awakened. You are present, but not absorbed. Available, but not dependent. Engaged, but not entangled. Maybe you help those who are just beginning to stir. Maybe you create art that cuts through the surface and touches something real. Maybe you speak or write in ways that remind others of what they've forgotten. Or maybe you simply live your life so honestly that your very presence becomes a quiet question in the minds of others. Is there another way to be? But you never go back to the old game. You can't. Once you've tasted awareness, you can't return to sleep. Once you've felt your authentic self, you can't go back to performing a part. Once you've seen through the illusion, pretending becomes impossible. Now, some will say, isn't this selfish? Shouldn't we stay and try to wake everyone else up? Shouldn't we fight to fix the system from the inside? But here's the plain truth. You can't give what you don't have. If you haven't awakened fully yourself, if you haven't done the hard work of integrating your own shadow, then you're just another unconscious person trying to wake up other unconscious people. And that only spreads more confusion, no matter how noble your intentions. The most honest thing you can do for the world is to wake up yourself. Do the deep, uncomfortable work. Become genuinely conscious. And only then, from that steady ground, can you offer something real to those who are ready. And understand this. Most people aren't ready. Most don't want to wake up. They want the familiar dream, the roles, the comfort of the play. And that's their right. Your role is not to drag anyone out of their sleep. Your role is to wake up and to quietly make yourself available to those who are beginning to stir. That's why the awakened disappear, not out of bitterness or disdain, but because they need space to breathe. To live without having to constantly shrink themselves to make others comfortable. They find each other in quiet corners in small circles away from the stage. They build small pockets of sanity in a world still lost in its performance. And this isn't abandonment, it's responsibility. The world doesn't need more people reinforcing the dream. It needs people who've walked through it, woken up, and found something real. It needs living examples of authenticity. So if you feel the pull to disappear, if the noise, the games, and the performances no longer hold your attention, if you can no longer find yourself in the crowd, then listen to that pull. That is not weakness. That is your soul asking for space to grow. Do not resist it. Do not feel guilty. Do not force yourself to stay where you no longer belong. Withdraw. Rest. Be alone without apology. This is not permanent. You will return, but when you do, you won't be the same. You will return whole, clear, real. Someone who can offer consciousness instead of more performance. Use that solitude wisely. Do the work. Face your own darkness. Find what's real inside you. Because what the world actually needs is not more noise, not more preaching, not more performance, but people who have actually awakened. The spiritually awake are disappearing because they must. Because consciousness cannot deepen in places built to keep people asleep. Because authenticity cannot survive in constant performance. Because truth can't be found in collective lies. So if you are one of them, let yourself go. Withdraw without shame. Disappear without apology. Stand alone without feeling alone. Trust that this is an old pattern, older than any religion or philosophy. The way every human being who has ever awakened has walked. The caterpillar must dissolve before it can fly. The seed must break before it becomes the tree. And the awakened person must step away from the crowd before they can offer something real to it. This is not the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of consciousness that isn't borrowed from anyone else. The beginning of life lived from the center rather than from the script. And though the world may not understand it yet, it will. When it begins to stir, and when it does, people like you will already be there. Not as saviors, not as saints, but as quiet beacons. Pioneers. Carriers of something real. And that is enough.
Why is it that so many people who are spiritually sensitive, who seem to have this inner knowing, this capacity for awareness, were born into families that were, shall we say, less than ideal, families that were dysfunctional, toxic, painful? And you might think, well, if the universe is so wise, if there's some kind of intelligence behind all this, why would it put these sensitive souls into such difficult circumstances? But what if I told you that this is not a mistake? What if the very thing you've been cursing, the very situation you've been trying to run from your entire life, is actually the most important, not because suffering is noble, but because sometimes the hardest soil produces the strongest trees. See, we have this notion that spiritual awakening should come through pleasant experiences, through meditation retreats, through reading wise books, through sitting quietly in beautiful gardens. And yes, these things can help. But the real awakening, the kind that shakes you to your bones, often comes through fire. It comes through difficulty. It comes through having everything you thought you needed stripped away until all that remains is what you truly are. Think about it this way. If you were born into a perfectly harmonious family, where everyone was kind and understanding, where love flowed freely and naturally, would you ever question anything? Would you ever look deeper? Would you ever have to develop that inner strength, that capacity to see through illusion? Probably not. You'd simply flow along with the current, never knowing there was anything else. But a toxic family, a dysfunctional family, they give you something else entirely. They give you friction. They give you problems that cannot be solved by ordinary means.
They give you situations where you cannot simply go along with what everyone else is doing, because what everyone else is doing is clearly mad. And in that friction, in that impossibility, something begins to wake up. Let me put it to you another way. When a grain of sand gets into an oyster, it irritates, it hurts. The oyster cannot simply eject it. So what does the oyster do? It begins to coat the grain of sand with layers of nacre, slowly, patiently, and eventually that irritating grain becomes a pearl. The most beautiful thing the oyster creates comes from the thing that hurt it most. Your toxic family was the grain of sand. And you, through all your struggles, through all your pain, through all those years of trying to understand why they were the way they were, you've been creating. You've been developing something that people born into easy circumstances never have to develop. Wisdom. Real wisdom. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind that comes from having to figure out how to survive when everything around you is chaos. But here's where it gets really interesting. A toxic family doesn't just create problems. It creates a very specific kind of problem. It creates confusion about love. And this, strange as it sounds, is the gateway to awakening. You see, most people never question what love is. They simply accept whatever their family taught them. If their family was loving, they assume that's what love looks like. If their family was distant, they assume love is supposed to be distant. They never have to think about it. They never have to examine it. They simply repeat the pattern. But when you're born into a toxic family, you cannot do this. The pattern is so obviously broken that you cannot simply repeat it. You might try it first. Many do, but eventually something in you rebels. Something in you says, no, this isn't right. This isn't what love is supposed to be. And in that moment of rebellion, in that refusal to accept the pattern, you've taken the first step toward awakening, because now you must figure out for yourself what love actually is. You cannot rely on what you were taught. You cannot trust the programming. You have to go deeper. You have to look within. You have to discover what love means when it's not mixed up with manipulation, with control, with conditions, with all the garbage your family attached to it. Not to suffer, though there was suffering. Not to be damaged, though there was damage. But to be forced to wake up, to be forced to question, to be forced to look deeper than most people ever have to look. Now, I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean the pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean what happened to you was okay. It doesn't mean you should feel grateful for abuse or neglect or whatever it was your family did. That would be missing the point entirely. The pain was real. The damage was real. What happened to you was not right. But here's the thing about reality. It doesn't care about our ideas of right and wrong. A tree doesn't grow straight by being kept in a greenhouse. It grows straight by being bent by the wind, by having to reach for the light, by having to develop deep roots to keep from being blown over. The wind is not kind. The wind is just wind. But without the wind, the tree would never develop strength. Your family was the wind, and you, whether you know it or not, have been developing roots that go very deep, roots that most people never have to grow. And those roots, that depth, that's what makes you capable of understanding things that others cannot understand. Think about the people you know who had easy childhoods, pleasant, comfortable, everything handed to them. What are they like now? I'm not saying they're bad people, but often they have a certain shallowness to them, don't they? A certain inability to grasp the darker, deeper aspects of life. They live on the surface because they've never had to go beneath it. They believe in fairy tales because their life has been something of a fairy tale. But you cannot believe in fairy tales. You've seen behind the curtain. You know that families can be cruel, that parents can be selfish, that love can be twisted into something ugly. And while this knowledge was painful to acquire, it has made you real in a way that protected people never become. You've been stripped of illusions. And while most people spend their entire lives clinging to illusions, you don't have that luxury. You had to see things as they actually are. And seeing things as they actually are, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. Now let's talk about something else. Something that might make you uncomfortable. Because here's a truth that's hard to accept. Your family wasn't just toxic to you. They were toxic because they were wounded. They were wounded because their parents were wounded. And their parents were wounded because their parents were wounded. It goes back and back and back, generation after generation, each one passing on the pain they received because they didn't know how to do anything else. You are the culmination of all that pain. All those generations of wounds, they all flowed into you. And you were the one who finally said, this stops here. You were the one who finally looked at the pattern and said, no more. I will not pass this on. I will not continue this cycle. And that is why you're different. That is why you were chosen, if you want to use that word. Not because you're special in some ego sense, but because your soul was strong enough to say, I will carry this weight. I will be the one who breaks the chain. Think about what that means. Your family, as toxic as they were not your enemies. They were your teachers. Terrible teachers, yes. Teachers who taught through pain rather than love. But teachers nonetheless. They showed you exactly what not to do. They showed you exactly what happens when people don't wake up, when they don't question, when they simply repeat the patterns they inherited. And by showing you what not to do, they forced you to figure out what to do. They forced you to become conscious. They forced you to choose. Because you see, that's the real gift. Choice. Most people never have to choose how to be. They simply are what their family made them. They're automatons, robots, running on programming they never questioned. But you had to choose. You had to consciously decide what kind of person you wanted to be. You had to consciously decide what you believed love was. You had to consciously decide what values you would hold, what kind of relationships you would have, what kind of life you would build. Nothing was automatic, nothing was given. Everything had to be chosen. And in that choosing, in that constant, difficult work of choosing, you became awake. You became conscious. You became, in the truest sense, yourself. Not what your family wanted you to be, not what society expected you to be, but what you, in your deepest knowing, chose to be. Now here's where people often get confused. They think awakening means being happy all the time, being peaceful all the time, being detached from everything. But that's not awakening. That's just another kind of sleep, another kind of escape. Real awakening means seeing clearly. It means understanding the patterns. It means recognizing that your family's behavior was not about you. It was never about you. It was about them, their wounds, their pain, their inability to love, because they had never been loved properly themselves. And when you see this, really see it, something extraordinary is happening. The anger begins to dissolve. Not because you force it to, not because you think you should forgive, but because you finally understand. You understand that they were not villains. They were wounded people acting out their wounds, unable to do anything else because no one ever showed them another way. Does this mean you have to have a relationship with them? No. Does this mean you have to trust them? Absolutely not. Does this mean you have to subject yourself to their toxicity? Not at all. Understanding is not the same as allowing abuse. Compassion is not the same as being a doormat. You can understand someone completely and still choose to stay away from them. You can have compassion for their wounds and still protect yourself from their behavior. These are not contradictions. These are simply different levels of understanding. The truly awakened person knows this. They know that protecting yourself is not the same as hating. They know that setting boundaries is not the same as being cruel. They know that you can wish someone well while also wishing them well from a great distance. And this is the freedom that comes from having been born into a toxic family. You learn to love without attachment. You learn to care without being consumed. You learn to see people clearly without judgment. Because you've had to do all these things with your own family. People from healthy families, they often struggle with this. They feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel selfish for prioritizing their own needs. They confuse love with sacrifice, with enduring pain, with putting up with behavior that damages them. because that's what they were taught. But you learned a different lesson. You learned that real love includes boundaries. That real love sometimes means saying no. That real love sometimes means walking away. Not with anger, not with hatred, but simply with the clear understanding that this situation is not good for you, and you have every right to choose situations that are. This is spiritual maturity. This is what most people spend lifetimes trying to learn. And you learned it early because you had no choice. Your family gave you an advanced course in what love is not. And in learning that, you also learned what love is. Let me share something with you. The most spiritually awake people I've ever known, they all had difficult childhoods. All of them. And for years I wondered why. Why does suffering seem to be the common denominator in awakening? And then I realized it's not about the suffering. It's about the questioning that suffering produces. When life is easy, you don't question. You don't have to. But when life is hard, when it doesn't make sense, when the people who are supposed to love you hurt you instead, you start asking the big questions. Why am I here? What is this all about? What is real and what is illusion? These questions, these are the questions that lead to awakening. Your toxic family pushed you to ask these questions early. They pushed you to look for meaning in a situation that seemed meaningless. They pushed you to find love in yourself because you couldn't find it in them. They pushed you to develop an inner life because the outer life was too painful. And in developing that inner life, in turning inward because the outer world was so harsh, you found something most people never find. You found your true self, not the self your family wanted you to be. Not the self society expected you to be, but the self you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the wounds, beneath all the stories. This self, this true self, it was always there. But most people never discover it, because they never have to look for it. They're too busy living on the surface, too busy being who everyone expects them to be. But you had to dig deep, because the surface was unbearable. And in digging deep, you struck gold. Now here's the final piece of this understanding. Your awakening is not just for you. It's for everyone. It's for your family, even though they may never acknowledge it. It's for the generations that came before you, because in healing yourself, you heal the ancestral line. And it's for the generations that will come after you, because you've broken the pattern, you've stopped the cycle. You've said, this madness ends with me. This is what it means to be spiritually awake. It's not about being better than others. It's not about being special. It's about being awake enough to see the patterns, strong enough to break them, and brave enough to choose differently even when it's difficult. Your toxic family was the darkness that forced you to find your own light. They were the problem that forced you to become the solution. They were the question that forced you to find the answer. And the answer you found, the light you discovered, it's not just for you. So yes, being born into a toxic family is a gift. Not because the toxicity was good, but because it forced you to become who you really are. It forced you to wake up when you might have slept through your entire life. It forced you to question when you might have simply accepted. It forced you to choose when you might have simply followed. And now, having done all that work, having climbed that mountain, having discovered that light within yourself, you stand as proof that transformation is possible, that breaking cycles is possible, that awakening is possible. Not despite the difficulties, but because of them. This is the great gift. This is why you were placed exactly where you were placed. Not to suffer, but to awaken. Not to be broken.
When a person begins to notice what others overlook, there is at first a kind of thrill. It feels like lifting a veil, like peering behind the stage into the machinery of the play. Suddenly, what seems solid and unquestionable is revealed to be shifting, relative, even dreamlike. Yet along with this exhilaration comes a quieter, heavier sensation, the realization that most people do not see and perhaps do not wish to. What you thought would be a shared discovery is instead a private burden. You may try to explain, to put into words, the insight that has dawned on you, but the language falls flat, and those you speak to blink as though you are speaking in riddles. It is as if you are pointing at the moon and they only see your finger. The danger of seeing what others do not is not so much that you are wrong, but that you are alone. Human beings are social creatures, and belonging is as essential as food or air. When the crowd looks one way and you are gazing in another, there is a current of unease. To be the only one who notices the emperor's new clothes is not merely a story about honesty, but about the peril of being out of step with the group. We draw safety from consensus, from the feeling that if everyone agrees, then it must be so. But the moment you glimpse something that contradicts the agreement, you find yourself at odds with the very fabric that holds people together. There is also the danger of arrogance. To see what others do not can feed the subtle belief that you are superior, that your vision grants you a special status. But this quickly becomes its own trap. For the moment you define yourself as the enlightened one, you have merely built a new wall between you and the rest. What began as a discovery dissolves into pride, and pride always isolates. The vision itself may have been clear, but the self that grasps it turns cloudy. In trying to hold on, you lose the very freedom you had glimpsed. Think of a child who suddenly understands a joke before anyone else in the room. They laugh aloud, expecting others to join, but the silence that greets them feels cold. The joy of recognition becomes embarrassment. In that instant, they learn that timing matters, that understanding out of sync with others can sting. Adults feel the same sting, though it wears the clothing of philosophy, religion, or insight. To wake up while others are still dreaming is not always a triumph. It can be profoundly lonely. And yet, what is it that we see when we see differently? Often, it is the fleeting nature of things, the fragility of what others call permanent. We notice that money, power, reputation, all the idols of society are as insubstantial as smoke. We notice that the roles people cling to with such intensity are costumes that will be dropped sooner or later. We notice that beneath the noise of ambition and fear, there is a silence, an openness that does not strive at all. To see this is to see through the game. And once you see through it, you cannot play it with the same seriousness again. But the others continue, earnest and intent, and your laughter sounds to them like madness. This is why so many teachers, poets, and mystics have spoken of exile. Not always a literal banishment, but a subtle one, the sense of not fitting, of being slightly out of tune with the orchestra around you. The music plays, but you hear a dissonance others ignore. And when you point it out, the players insist that everything is fine. You begin to wonder if you are the one out of tune, if the clarity that once felt liberating is instead a form of delusion. The mind wavers between certainty and doubt, and both carry their own weight. But consider that every vision, every new perception in history has always begun with someone who saw differently. The danger of seeing what others do not is real, but it is also the seed of transformation. Still, in the beginning, it feels like standing at the edge of a vast forest while the village insists the world ends at the meadow. You want to describe the trees, the shadows, the depth of the woods, but to them it sounds like fantasy. And so you stand with one foot in the known and one foot in the unknown, belonging fully to neither. This is the tension. To carry in your heart a glimpse of something wider, something truer, while moving among people who are content with their smaller maps. The danger is not only that they will misunderstand you, but that you will begin to misunderstand yourself, to doubt the vision, or to inflate it, or to guard it so fiercely that it becomes brittle. You may try to smother it, to return to ordinary sleep. But the dream of the world never fits again once you have seen beyond it. You may try to proclaim it loudly, but the louder you shout, the less others hear. And so you walk with it quietly, unsure whether it is a blessing or a curse. There is also fear, the kind of fear that whispers, if I let go of what the crowd believes, where will I belong? For belief is not merely a private act. It is the glue of societies, families, friendships. To question it is to risk unraveling bonds that feel necessary for survival. And so, many who see hesitate to admit it, even to themselves. They carry the vision like a secret flame, shielding it from the wind of public opinion, never certain if they're protecting it or themselves. The danger is isolation, the danger is misunderstanding, the danger is pride, but beneath all of these, the deepest danger is that you will forget how to laugh. To take your vision so gravely that you become rigid, cut off not only from others, but from the very life that showed you this glimpse in the first place. This is why many who awaken fall into despair before they find peace. It is the dark night of seeing what others do not. It is not enough to notice the illusion. The greater challenge is to live with that noticing, to carry it gracefully among those who are still entranced. To be in the world but not of it, as some traditions put it, is not a slogan but a daily balancing act. And until that balance is found, the gift of sight can feel like a curse. For to walk in two worlds at once is never comfortable. And yet, what seems at first to be a curse reveals itself, with time, to be the very doorway into freedom. The loneliness of seeing differently is only sharp when you imagine that you must convince others that your vision has to be validated by the crowd to be real. The moment you let go of that demand, the burden softens. For truth is not dependent upon recognition, and awareness does not become less itself because it is unnoticed. The sky does not stop being the sky when clouds cover it, and the ocean does not cease to be the ocean when no ship sails its surface. In the same way, what you have seen remains what it is, whether or not another agrees. The resolution, then, is not to return to sleep, nor to shout at the dreamers, but to walk lightly, to live what you have seen without needing applause. When you understand that the world is play, that life is a dance, you can smile at the earnestness of those still caught in the game without condemning them. You see that their seriousness, their striving and fear are also part of the whole, just as your laughter and insight are. The one who sees is not apart from those who do not see, but an expression of the same reality, taking on a different mask. This changes the flavor of your vision. What was once heavy becomes light. The awareness that isolated you begins to connect you more deeply. For now you recognize that those who do not see are not wrong. They are simply playing another part in the cosmic performance. Without them, there would be no contrast, no stage upon which your own role makes sense. Just as music requires silence, just as light requires shadow, the clarity of sight requires the backdrop of blindness. The difference does not divide, but completes. Think of the flower blooming in a field. It does not demand that the grasses beside it also bloom in the same way. It simply unfolds, radiates, expresses its nature. And in doing so, it contributes to the whole field, not by making others like itself, but by being precisely what it island. So too with the one who sees. The task is not to reform the world into your vision, but to live your vision as naturally as the flower blooms. In that authenticity, you become nourishment for others, whether they realize it or not. And sometimes, without effort, others notice. A word you speak casually, a silence you embody, a lightness in your presence, these become sparks that awaken curiosity. But even if they do not, nothing is lost. The play continues, the dance unfolds, and your part is no less vital because it is unrecognized. The true gift of seeing differently is not superiority, but freedom. You are no longer bound by the unquestioned rules of the game. You may play them if you wish, for the joy of it, but you are not deceived into thinking the outcome is final. You may step back when the game grows tedious, laugh when others are grim, and rest when others are restless. This freedom is subtle, but it changes everything. For when you are no longer driven by the compulsion to prove, you discover a gentleness that can embrace all. Even the danger that once haunted you of being alone, of being misunderstood, becomes part of the comedy. You see that every prophet, every poet, every thinker who glimpsed beyond the ordinary faced the same fate. And yet their words carried through time, not because they fought the blindness of their contemporaries, but because they simply sang their song. And so the invitation is not to fight, but to sing. To let your vision express itself in whatever way it wishes, whether in speech, in silence, in action, or in stillness. In this way, the danger dissolves into play. The one who sees and the one who does not are both the universe in disguise. There is no real separation, no real opposition. What looked like alienation is in fact another face of intimacy. For to be the only one awake in a room of sleepers is still to share the same room, the same night, the same dream. The laughter you carry, though quiet, is still part of the whole sound. And so, you may rest, you may see without clinging, you may walk without boasting, you may love without demanding agreement. The vision you carry is not a weapon, not a burden, not even a possession. It is simply the light by which you move, as natural as breathing, as effortless as being. And in time, you may even forget that you are different, for the difference no longer defines you. You are not the seer against the blind, but the whole itself, playing at many levels of awareness, all equally necessary, all equally divine. And perhaps the most subtle shift of all is this. What once seemed like your private vision begins to reveal itself as nothing personal at all. The sight that you carry is not your possession, not an achievement of the mind, but the universe opening its own eyes through you. In that moment, even the idea of seeing differently softens, for you recognize that all seeing belongs to the same awareness. The distinction between those who see and those who do not becomes less sharp, more playful, like the changing of roles in a play where each actor takes their turn under the spotlight. Consider the ocean again, with its endless waves. Some waves rise high, glistening in the sun, while others barely ripple upon the surface. To the eye, they seem distinct, greater or lesser, bold or quiet. But to the ocean, they are one movement, inseparable. The wave that sees its own crest does not look down upon the trough. It knows both of the same water. So it is with the one who glimpses beyond the usual illusion. Not superior, not apart, but simply aware that all are movements of the same depth. This awareness gives birth to compassion. For when you no longer feel compelled to drag others into your vision, you can love them as they are. The seriousness with which they chase their ambitions, the fears they nurse, the dramas they play out, all of it becomes endearing, as though you were watching children at play. Not condescension, but tenderness, because you recognize yourself in them. You too once played those games in full sincerity, and perhaps you still do, for even the awakened must sometimes forget in order to live. Forgetting is part of remembering, blindness is part of sight. And so you walk more gently, you listen more patiently, you smile more easily. The vision you carry ceases to be a sharp edge dividing you from others, and becomes instead a soft light by which you move among them. You are not required to convince or convert, only to live in such a way that your very being whispers of a freedom beyond striving. That whisper, whether heard or not, belongs to the music of the whole. Notice also how the danger dissolves when you see that what you feared isolation was never truly there. The feeling of being apart arose only when you believed that awareness belonged to you, that you were a solitary flame among darkness. But the flame was never yours. It is the fire of existence itself, and it burns in every heart. whether seen or unseen. You cannot be apart from it, any more than a drop of water can fall outside the sea. The very sense of separation was part of the illusion you were meant to see through. And what then remains? A deep ease, a kind of trust. You do not need to calculate how others will respond, or whether your insight will be accepted. You simply live, and in that living, the truth finds its own expression. Sometimes it will flower visibly, sometimes it will lie hidden beneath the soil, but the life of it continues, regardless. You no longer demand outcomes, because you no longer confuse outcomes with reality. Reality is here already, shimmering in each moment, and you are not apart from it. This is why many who see differently eventually become playful again. They laugh more, they sing, they enjoy the simple things. For when the burden of proving and defending falls away, what remains is the joy of being. And that joy is contagious in ways words never are. People may not understand your philosophy, but they feel your presence. They may not follow your reasoning, but they sense your ease. And in time, that ease does more than any argument could. So perhaps the true resolution is not to stand above or apart, but to rejoin the play consciously, to move among others not as a stranger, but as a companion who knows the dream is a dream and still delights in its colors. To take part in the laughter and the tears, not because you are deceived, but because you recognize them as the texture of the whole. In this way, seeing what others do not ceases to be a danger at all. It becomes a gift, not only to you, but to everyone around you, even if they never realize it. And as the words slow and the reflection settles, perhaps you can sense the spaciousness in which all of this unfolds. The danger, the vision, the loneliness, the joy, all of it rising and falling, like breath, like waves, like the endless turning of the earth. To see is simply to notice this movement. To live is to be this movement, and to rest is to allow it all, without resistance, without demand, without fear.
You know, there's a peculiar phenomenon that occurs when someone begins to wake up, when someone starts to see through the game that everyone else is playing. And that is, they become frightening to other people. Now, why should this be? Why should clarity be threatening? Why should someone who sees deeply into the nature of things make others uncomfortable? Well, let me tell you, it's one of the most interesting aspects of human psychology. And it reveals something very profound about the way we organize our collective lives, our societies, our very sense of who we are. You see, most people are living in what I call a mutual conspiracy. We've all agreed, tacitly, unconsciously, to believe certain things about reality. We've agreed that the emperor is wearing clothes, even though he's quite naked. We've agreed that this piece of paper called money has value. We've agreed that these arbitrary lines on a map called borders are real and important. We've agreed that you are you and I am I, and we're separate, isolated individuals competing for scarce resources in a hostile universe. Now, none of these things are fundamentally true. They're conventions, agreements, useful fictions that allow us to organize society and get along with each other. But we've forgotten that they're fictions. We've mistaken the map for the territory, the menu for the meal. And we live our entire lives inside this agreed-upon hallucination, never questioning it, never looking behind the curtain. Then along comes someone who has seen through it, someone who has realized that the emperor has no clothes, someone who has awakened from the collective dream. And what does this person do? Well, if they're wise, they might say nothing at all. They might simply smile and go about their business. But even their silence, even their smile, can be deeply unsettling to others. Because you see, when you encounter someone who has seen through the game, something inside you recognizes it. Some part of you knows that they know something you've been trying very hard not to know. They represent a threat to your entire framework of reality, your entire sense of security and identity. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're in a theater, watching a film, completely absorbed in the story. You're identifying with the hero, you're afraid of the villain, you're emotionally invested in the outcome. Then someone leans over and whispers, "You know, it's just actors on a screen. None of this is real." How do you feel? Annoyed, probably. You don't want to be reminded that it's just a film. You want to stay in the illusion because the illusion is entertaining, it's engaging, it gives you something to feel strongly about. Now, multiply that by 1,000, and you begin to understand why people fear those who see too much. Because what these awakened individuals see is that everything, not just the film in the theater, but your job, your relationships, your ambitions, your fears, your entire life story is in a certain sense not as real as you think it is. It's a role you're playing, a character you're performing, a dream you're dreaming, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to be told that what they're taking so seriously is fundamentally a game, a play, a cosmic joke. Because if it's just a game, then what have they been doing all these years? All that striving, all that suffering, all those achievements and failures, were they for nothing? The awakened person seems to threaten the very meaning of your existence. But there's something even deeper going on. You see, our entire social structure is built on people taking the game seriously. Civilization requires that people show up to their jobs, pay their taxes, follow the rules, pursue success, fear failure, and generally behave as if all of this matters in some ultimate, absolute sense. The system needs you to be asleep, to be hypnotized, to be convinced that the symbols and abstractions we've created are real and important. Someone who has awakened from this trance is dangerous to the system. Not because they're going to rebel or cause trouble, necessarily quite the opposite. They might be perfectly content and peaceful, but their very existence, their very presence, reminds others that there's a way out of the trap. They're like someone who has escaped from prison and come back to visit. The prisoners don't want to see them because it reminds them that the prison bars are, in a sense, optional. Throughout history, we see this pattern repeating. The awakened ones, the seers, the prophets, the mystics, they're consistently marginalized, ridiculed, persecuted, or killed. Not always, of course. Sometimes they're tolerated, sometimes they're even venerated, but usually only after they're safely dead and their teachings have been domesticated and made harmless. But while they're alive, while they're actually demonstrating that another way of being is possible, they make people very nervous. Think of Socrates, who was condemned to death for corrupting the youth of Athens. What was his crime, really? He was asking questions, encouraging people to think for themselves, to examine their assumptions, to see through the conventional beliefs of society, and for this he had to drink hemlock. The authorities couldn't tolerate someone showing the young people that the emperor had no clothes. Or think of Jesus, who was crucified essentially for the same reason. He was pointing to a reality beyond the religious and political structures of his time. He was saying that the kingdom of heaven is within you, that you don't need priests or temples or elaborate rituals to connect with the divine. This was tremendously threatening to the establishment, both religious and political, because if people realized this, the whole power structure would collapse. The person who sees too much reveals something that most people desperately want to keep hidden, even from themselves. They reveal that you are not who you think you are. That little voice in your head that you call I, that anxious, worried, ambitious entity that's always trying to get somewhere or become something that's not you. That's just a thought pattern, a habit of mind, a character you've been playing for so long that you've forgotten it's a character. What you really are is much vaster, much more mysterious, much more free than this little ego identity. You are the consciousness in which all of this appears. You are not separate from the world, from the universe, from existence itself. You are what the whole cosmos is doing at this particular place and time, just as a wave is what the whole ocean is doing at a particular place and time. But this realization, this seeing, undermines everything that society has taught you about who you are and what you should be doing with your life. It undermines the whole story of progress and achievement and making something of yourself. Because if you're already it, if you're already the universe experiencing itself, then what is there to achieve? Where is there to go? Now, don't misunderstand me. The awakened person doesn't become passive or lazy or irresponsible. Quite the contrary. They often become more engaged with life, more creative, more compassionate. But they're playing the game of life knowingly, consciously, without being trapped by it. They're dancing, but they know they're dancing. And this knowledge, this freedom, is what others find so threatening. Because if you're around someone like this for any length of time, something starts to happen. The certainty you had about your beliefs begins to wobble. The stories you've been telling yourself start to sound a bit hollow. The fears and desires that have been driving you begin to lose their grip. And this is terrifying, because these beliefs, these stories, these fears and desires, they're what you've been using to navigate life. They're your map. And if the map is wrong, if it's just a fiction, then you're lost. The person who sees too much doesn't even have to say anything directly challenging. Their very being, their very presence, emanates a kind of freedom that exposes the bondage others are in. It's like someone walking around without chains in a prison where everyone else is shackled. The shackled prisoners don't feel grateful, they feel accused. They feel judged, even though no judgment is being made. This is why awakened individuals often learn to hide their light, so to speak. They learn to speak in parables and paradoxes, to couch their insights in acceptable language, to appear more conventional than they are, because they've learned that most people aren't ready to hear the truth. Most people are too invested in their illusions, too identified with their roles, too afraid of the freedom that comes with seeing through the game. And, there's a kind of violence in waking someone up before they're ready. If someone is having a pleasant dream, you don't shake them awake unless the house is on fire. The person who sees too much understands this. They understand that awakening happens in its own time, that you can't force it, that everyone is exactly where they need to be in their journey. But still, their very existence is a kind of invitation, a possibility, a door standing open. And for those who are ready, who are beginning to question their own dream, who are starting to feel that something isn't quite right with the official version of reality for these people, encountering someone who has seen through the veil can be life-changing. It can be the catalyst for their own awakening. However, for those who aren't ready, who are deeply invested in the dream, who have built their entire identity and sense of security on the collective hallucination for these people, the awakened individual is a threat that must be neutralized. And society has many ways of doing this. The most obvious way is simply to ignore them, to dismiss them as crazy or impractical or naive. Oh, that's all very nice and mystical, people say, but you can't live that way in the real world. You've got bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, a life to live. As if the awakened person isn't living. As if they're somehow less engaged with reality rather than more engaged. But you see, this dismissal reveals the real fear. What if they're right? What if there is another way to live that doesn't involve all this striving and suffering and anxiety? What if you could be in the world fully without being of it, without being trapped by it? This possibility is so threatening that it must be dismissed immediately, without examination. Another way society deals with those who see too much is to try to capture them, to domesticate them, to turn them into another part of the system. Oh, you've had a spiritual experience? Wonderful. Why don't you write a book about it? Give some lectures. Start a retreat center. And before you know it, the person who saw through the game has become a player in a new game, a spiritual seeking game, which can be just as much of a trap as any other game. Or society might try to explain away their insights. Oh, you think you've awakened? That's just a neurological phenomenon, or a psychological state, or the result of meditation practice, as if giving it a label somehow diminishes it, somehow makes it safe and manageable and less threatening. But these labels are just more concepts, more ways of avoiding the direct encounter with what is. The deepest fear that people have about those who see too much is not that they're wrong, but that they're right, that there really is another way of experiencing reality. That the anxiety and suffering and endless striving that characterizes most human life is not necessary, not inevitable, not the price we have to pay for being conscious beings. Because if that's true, then you've been had. You've been living in a prison of your own making. You've been taking seriously what doesn't need to be taken seriously and ignoring what really matters. You've been, in the words of Thoreau, living a life of quiet desperation when you could have been dancing. And nobody wants to realize this. It's too painful. It's easier to dismiss the awakened ones as deluded, impractical, or dangerous than to consider that they might be seeing something you're missing. It's easier to stay in the comfortable prison of your familiar suffering than to step into the terrifying freedom of not knowing who you are. But here's the beautiful paradox. The awakened person isn't actually threatening you. They're not trying to take anything from you or impose anything on you. In fact, they see you more clearly and compassionately than you see yourself. They see that you're playing a role, yes, but they also see what's behind the role, the same consciousness, the same awareness, the same fundamental being that they've discovered in themselves. They see that you're afraid, and they understand why. They see that you're suffering, and they have compassion. They see that you're lost in the dream, and they remember what that's like because they were lost too once. They're not judging you. They're simply being what they are. And their being serves as a mirror in which you might, if you dare to look, see your own true nature reflected. The fear that people feel toward those who see too much is really the fear of their own freedom. It's the fear of discovering that they've been playing a game all along that they could have stopped any time they wanted. It's the fear of responsibility, not the conventional responsibility of paying bills and meeting obligations, but the deeper responsibility of being the author of your own experience, the creator of your own reality. You see, as long as you believe that reality is fixed and solid and you're just a small, separate individual trying to survive in it, then you're off the hook. You can blame circumstances, other people, your past, your genetics, society, anything. But if you wake up and see that you are not separate from reality, that you are reality experiencing itself, then suddenly you can't blame anyone or anything. You are it. And that's a terrifying realization for most people. The person who sees too much has accepted this responsibility. They've stopped arguing with reality, stopped resisting what is, stopped pretending to be other than what they are. And in that acceptance, in that surrender, they've found a kind of freedom that others can scarcely imagine. Not freedom from circumstances. They still have bodies that get sick, relationships that have difficulties, problems to solve. But freedom from the psychological suffering that comes from resistance, from wanting things to be different than they are, from identifying with a separate self that must constantly defend and promote itself. This freedom is attractive and terrifying in equal measure. It's attractive because everyone wants to be free of suffering. But it's terrifying because it requires dying, not physically, but psychologically. It requires the death of the ego, the death of the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and what life is about. And nobody wants to die, even metaphorically, even when that death would lead to a greater life. So people fear those who see too much because they represent a kind of death, the death of illusion, the death of the familiar, the death of the known. But they also represent a kind of birth, the birth into reality, into presence, into your true nature. And birth, like death, is frightening, even when it's exactly what needs to happen. The tragedy is that this fear causes people to miss the very thing they most deeply long for. Beneath all the striving and achieving and worrying and planning, there's a deep longing for peace, for wholeness, for coming home to yourself. The person who sees too much has found that home, not by going anywhere or becoming anything, but simply by waking up to what they already are. And their message, though it's often unspoken, is simply this: you can wake up too. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to take the dream so seriously. You don't have to spend your whole life trying to become something other than what you already are. You are it. You've always been it. You could never be anything else. But this message, this truth, is too simple, too immediate, too obvious. People want something more complicated, more difficult, more distant. They want a path to follow, a goal to achieve, something to do. And the awakened person says, there's nowhere to go and nothing to do because you're already there and you're already doing it. And people find this infuriating because it pulls the rug out from under their entire project of self-improvement and spiritual seeking. So they fear those who see too much, because these awakened ones reveal the cosmic joke, the divine comedy,
the ultimate irony, that what you're seeking is what's seeking, that the seeker is the sought, that you are what you're looking for. And once you get the joke, once you really see it, you can't help but laugh. But until you get it, the laughter of the awakened sounds like mockery, and their peace looks like indifference, and their freedom feels like an accusation.